2 of the 3 branches assignment. I ended at the legislative branch. I think I may have gone over the qualifications of the executive, but that's where I'll start. So, the formal qualifications for the executive, natural born citizen, which was a point of contention in the Obama era. There was a citizen by the name of Donald Trump that helped lead others to what was called the birther movement. I don't think Donald Trump started the birther movement, but he sure enhanced the birther movement, where there was a question about then President-elect Obama's natural born citizenship status. Anyway, that was proven to be an unqualified claim that President Obama was indeed a natural born citizen. Let's see. So the qualifications: natural born citizen and 14 years resident within the United States. Yeah, I think. Oh yeah, 35 years of age. That's what I was missing. All right. Moving on in your assignment, anyway. After the 3 formal qualifications is the 22nd Amendment. So the 22nd Amendment is important in that it's going to put presidential term limits in place. And of course, the question asks for you to give a little bit of the background story and why they were going to come up with the 22nd Amendment, and it revolves, excuse me, revolves around this gentleman, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who runs for a 3rd term, is elected, and runs for a 4th term, is elected. He will die during his 4th term, but he was legitimately elected to a 4th term. Since President Washington walked away from a 3rd term back in 1796, the unwritten rule was that you just don't run for a 3rd term. So it was never formalized until the 22nd Amendment. Washington said that they had just fought to get rid of one King George. He didn't want to become another King George. So he walked away and went and lived at Mount Vernon for the rest of his days. Up until Roosevelt. Now, Roosevelt, of course, is going to be the president during the Great Depression, and therefore this is pretty unusual times, or that was pretty unusual times. World War II, wildly popular president. My grandmother used to speak wildly, highly of President Roosevelt during our discussions over the years. And because of that, Congress became nervous of the consolidation of power that took place during the Roosevelt years. He had become so popular, and executive-wise, his power may have exceeded the power given to him by the Constitution. And therefore, the lawmaking body decided to do something about that, and they were able to get it passed through the states and limit the terms of presidency. Now, a lot of people have claimed that or had called for the repeal of that because it seems undemocratic, and again, that can be debated. Is that an undemocratic? If you can be reelected on your own accord, then isn't that true democracy? But it can be argued. And I would say see the term gerrymandering. However, that doesn't apply to the presidential race, but that is an argument against, or an argument for term limits, I should say, as far as the legislative branch is concerned. Let's see. Okay. Pay and benefits, standard base salary for the president, $400,000, of course, taxpayer money, but there are other expenses within there, access to the White House, Air Force One, helicopter. They do okay. A lot of responsibility, of course. The term secession. So you need to know or understand basically presidential succession, and ultimately all that is who follows the president. Now, there's been a few times in history where after the vice president, who's next? So, Presidential Succession Act of 1947 kind of lays out the present line of succession for the president, and that's down here. So it goes president, vice president. So rarely do the president and vice president travel together or go to similar events together. I mean, it happens. It's going to have to happen on a case-to-case basis. But generally, they try to stay apart just because of that. Now, the only story I have about the line of succession would be the Reagan era. When I was your age and I was homesick watching Days of Our Lives, there was a news bulletin that came across, or a news break, and then they preempted the programming for the news break. And President Reagan there was an attempted assassination, he had been shot. And as was standard protocol, he was whisked away to the hospital, and the vice president, I believe at that time, was out of the country. So our government was kind of in a tizzy because they didn't necessarily understand the line of succession, or some of the main players in the line of succession were not available. So normally that would automatically, if the president is in a hospital, they're going to take the vice president to a safe, secluded area spot, and they're going to sign some documents stating that if certain health risks are a factor, that he may have to take over. Well, at the time of the president's assassination attempt, I do recall people asking questions. Well, who's next if the vice president is out of the country? And there was an argument going on at the time within the cabinet of Reagan. And I'm not sure what the status of the Speaker of the House or the pro tempore was at the time. All I know is that the Secretary of State at the time decided that he would take charge. He was an old military veteran. I don't remember if he was a colonel or a general, but it doesn't matter. He said, I'm in charge here. Because of all the confusion, he just decided to take charge. Well, if you look at the list, technically not quite at that level. The Speaker of the House and the pro tempore, he was trying to kind of leapfrog them. So anyway, once it gets to those top four, or the top three actually, then it goes into the cabinet. So you can see the lineup as far as succession of the president is concerned. So hopefully you never get past the vice president. All right, then we delve into the court system. So the judiciary, for your assignment, basically, all I really was concerned about was kind of the basics. So we have a dual court system. So that just means we have a federal court system and we have a state court system. Once you get into the federal court, there are two kinds of federal court. So you have your Supreme Court, and then you have your inferior courts. Right? So dual court, federal, state. Get into the federal courts, there's two types of federal courts, supreme and inferior. You get into inferior courts, and there's two types of inferior court, constitutional and special. All right, and then I told you just to list the number. You didn't have to name everything, but the number of inferior courts. And you can see the constitutional courts, and then you can see the special courts. And I believe in the text, it's numbered for you, or gives you an actual number of the courts inside the inferior courts. I believe it's 6 special courts. Well, there we go. 94 district courts, 12 courts of appeals. All right, so, and then your 6 special courts. All right, and that's all the farther you really had to go. Then you get into what is called jurisdiction. You just have to understand jurisdiction, who is going to have the power in a case, and at the federal level, most court cases, the bulk of the court cases come out of the states, but federal cases are usually determined by subject matter and parties involved. So if it's a member of Congress or the government, high-powered member of the government, it's going to be waived to federal court. And all that means is the case is going to be prosecuted or run by the federal government and all of its resources, all of its intelligence resources, all of its police resources, the power of the purse, basically. So a state case, sure, they have access to state funding or state functions, state technology. But if you're talking about the federal government and you have a case that is waived into the federal court, that means potentially you are taking on the federal government. Right? And that can be a pretty tall task. So, Gabrielle Giffords, senator or congresswoman from Arizona, several years ago was at a campaign at a mall and was shot. Seriously wounded, still drastically affected today. Her husband, as a matter of fact, was just elected to, I believe, that Senate seat. So what used to be her Senate seat, her husband just was elected to it in this last election. Anyway, the shooter in that case automatically, once arrested, was going to be prosecuted in the federal courts, and that is the case in that instance. So, and then you were just define a couple of other jurisdiction terms, I believe, concurrent. Let me see. Concurrent and exclusive. So, as far as who has the rights to try in that case. All right. Tried to keep this short and sweet, and I think I have done so. So, that is it for the 3 branches assignment. Thank you for listening.